The COVID-19 virus was created in a lab and used against us so that the elite few can take away our freedom and create a never-ending supply of wealth and power for themselves. They are the Pilgrim Society. There is a very real group of the world's richest people who run and control this world.
The Pilgrim Society functions as a way for the British and American elite, almost exclusively white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, to gather and deliberate in private without public oversight.
Rich and powerful elites have long dreamed of world control. The ambitious Romans, Attila the Hun, the Mughals of India all exercised immense influence over different parts of the globe in set periods of recognized ascendancy. Many conquerors saw success throughout history, but was never effectively global until the 20th century. At that point, with the future of the British Empire under threat from other aspiring nations, in particular Germany, a momentous decision was taken by a group of powerful and determined men. Their decision was that action had to be taken to assert their control, and that of the British race, over the entire civilized world. It has grown from that tiny select cabal into a monster that may already be beyond control. The Pilgrim Society, founded in 1902 by Sir Harry Brattain of London. It was forged to extend the power of the British and the Americans and forge a long-lasting Anglo-American friendship. It boasts an elite membership of politicians, diplomats, businessmen and bankers. Over the history of the Pilgrim Society, the patron has been the British Crown. The current patron of the Society is Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Among the earliest and most influential members are names you already know: Rockefeller, Morgan, Rothschilds and the British royal family. These four families, along with Bill Gates, still run the Pilgrim Society today. US President Andrew Jackson declared his disdain for the international bankers. There followed an unsuccessful assassination attempt on President Jackson's life. On June 4, 1963, a virtually unknown presidential decree, Executive Order 11110, was signed with the authority to basically strip the Rothschild Bank of its power to loan money to the United States federal government at interest. When President John F. Kennedy signed this order, it returned to the United States federal government, specifically the Treasury Department, the constitutional power to create and issue currency, money, without going through the privately owned Rothschild or Rockefeller Federal Reserve Bank. This means that for every ounce of silver in the United States Treasury's vault, the government could introduce new money into circulation based on the silver bullion physically held there. As a result, more than $4 billion in United States notes were brought into circulation in $2 and $5 denominations. $10 and $20 United States notes were never circulated but were being printed by the Treasury Department when Kennedy was assassinated. Just before this could be implemented, JFK was assassinated. Lyndon Johnson became president, and his first order of business was to backflip on JFK's plan to free the USA from debt and return the economy over to the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. The reason modern technology has not been able to pinpoint the killer influenza strain from the Spanish flu pandemic is because influenza was not the killer. More soldiers died during World War I from disease than from bullets. The pandemic was not flu. An estimated 95% or higher of the deaths were caused by bacterial pneumonia, not influenza. The pandemic was not Spanish. The first cases of bacterial pneumonia in 1918 traced back to a military base in Fort Riley, Kansas. From January the 21st to June the 4th, 1918, an experimental bacterial meningitis vaccine cultured in horses by the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research in New York was injected into soldiers at Fort Riley. During the remainder of 1918, as those soldiers, often living and travelling under poor sanitary conditions, were sent to Europe to fight, they spread bacteria at every stop between Kansas and the frontline trenches in France. The Spanish flu attacked healthy people in their prime. Bacterial pneumonia attacked people in their prime. Flu attacked the young, old, and immunocompromised. When World War I ended on November the 11th, 1918, soldiers returned to their homes and colonial outposts, spreading the killer bacterial pneumonia worldwide. During World War I, the Rockefeller Institute also sent the anti-meningococcal serum to England, France, Belgium, Italy, and other countries, helping spread the epidemic worldwide. This bacterial pneumonia caused by the Rockefellers killed between 50 million and 100 million people.
What do you see as the biggest challenges in conservation?
The growing human population. Where we are, there's nothing else.
And do you have views about what should be done about that?
Not a guess.
Well, it could be on a spectrum from mass sterilisation to greater availability of contraception. I don't know what your views are as to what can be done about it.
Well, I think it might be described as voluntary family limitation.
Princess Diana was killed in a car crash in France immediately after rumours landed in the newspapers that she was pregnant with Dodi Fayed's baby. The Queen's first comment upon being told of Diana's death was to say, "Someone must have greased the brakes."
And a lack of willingness to say, is spending $1 million on that last 3 months of life for that patient, would it be better to see which ones actually have no benefit whatsoever? But that's called the death panel.
Microsoft staff were forced to view photos and videos of indescribable sexual assaults and horrible brutality, including the rape and murder of children, resulting in severe post-traumatic stress disorder, according to a lawsuit filed against Bill Gates and Microsoft. Bill Gates' family tree also shows that he is related to the Rockefellers and the British royal family. Even though Bill Gates repeatedly denies any relationship with sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, records clearly show that he has visited his private island and flew on his private plane several times. In 2018, India's National Technical Advisory Group on Immunization announced that it would be banning the Gates Foundation from operating in the country after it was revealed that the vaccines the foundation had been promoting to make people healthier were actually doing irreparable damage to young girls, and that the Gates Foundation campaigns were actually experimental trials of the vaccines. Mainstream investigators have found that these vaccine trials in India led to tens of thousands of injuries and deaths among young women.
eventually what we'll have to have is certificates of who's a recovered person, who's a vaccinated person, because you don't want people moving around the world where you'll have some countries that won't have it under control. Sadly, you don't want to completely block off the ability for those, people to go there and come back and move around. So eventually there will be sort of this digital immunity proof that, will help facilitate the global reopening up.
The philanthropist has also funded secretive sterilization programs and says we should form death panels to differentiate between those who are worthy of life and those who have no benefit whatsoever to society. Now we are starting to see the horrific results of Gates' depopulation agenda playing out around the world. Kenya doesn't find Gates' fake concern for the human race amusing either. In September of 2017, it was reported that at least 500,000 young Kenyan girls and women have been made sterile, following a tetanus vaccine administered by the government and pushed by the international organization in Bill Gates' back pocket. The Rockefellers played an instrumental role in forming the United Nations. In fact, John D. Rockefeller Jr. wrote a check for $8.5 million for the purchase of the 6-block Manhattan East River site where the United Nations will build its permanent headquarters in 1947. Bill Gates is also a partner of the UN with billions of dollars worth of funding. Bill Gates is the World Health Organization's second largest donor. He is treated like a head of state, not only at the WHO, but also at the G20, a Geneva-based NGO representative said, calling Gates one of the most influential men in global health. Behind the curtain, the WHO has been bullied and pushed around by Bill Gates, according to various sources, one who is even writing a book on the domination of the WHO by Gates. The Rockefeller Foundation profoundly shaped the foundation of the WHO and remains a long-time partner. Money controls the CDC, and they love Bill Gates' money. Gates funds many CDC agendas, most notably the Decade of Vaccines. The CDC officially lists Gates as a partner, and the two work hand in hand. The first major sponsor of the CDC were the Rockefellers, with the Rockefeller Foundation still funding the CDC today, along with the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and Morgans are slowly but surely having their central banks established in every country of this world, giving them incredible amounts of wealth and power. In the year of 2000, there were 7 countries without a Rothschild-owned or controlled central bank: Afghanistan, Iraq, Sudan, Libya, Cuba, North Korea, and Iran. All they needed to do was create a reason to wage war and take over the central banks of these countries, which they did in 2001. Currently, in 2020, only 3 nations do not have a Pilgrim-run central bank: Cuba, North Korea, and Iran. The first step in having a central bank established in a country is to get them to accept an outrageous loan, which puts the country in debt of the central bank and under the control of the Pilgrims. All Pilgrim-run central banking nations are printing coronavirus stimulus checks to its citizens, and the money from that loan is to be paid back to the Pilgrims at interest. The US Federal Reserve is a privately owned company, sitting on its very own patch of land, immune to the US laws. This privately owned company controlled by the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and Morgans. The Council on Foreign Relations is headed and funded by the Rothschild and Rockefeller families, with Bill Gates getting hand claps from the CFR all over the internet for funding their projects. All the leading British and American newspapers were weaponized in 1909 by the British government-led Pilgrims Society. The Daily Telegraph, the Daily Mail, the Times, the Daily Mirror, the Daily Express, Sunday Times, Observer, Financial Times, Washington Post, New York Times, Chicago Tribune, Boston Globe, etc. As radio and television emerged in the 1920s, the list of Pilgrim weaponized intelligence propaganda media expanded to BBC, NBC, CBS, ABC, MSNBC, CBC, CNN, CNBC, Comcast, and now Fox. The CIA, FBI, NSA, and State Department are the stepchildren under Pilgrim Society control today. Facebook's largest initial investor was a venture capital firm established by the CIA. Pilgrims can easily promote themselves and their agenda through the use of mainstream media networks like CNN. CNN is owned by Time Warner, which is owned by JP Morgan Chase. The House of Morgan have been Pilgrim members from the beginning. Crashed the economy to kill small businesses and set record unemployment levels. The governments rely on the Pilgrim-run central banks for bailouts and stimulus money. The Pilgrims then give every government in the world money that was not theirs in the first place, and the government then pays back huge loans at interest. The Pilgrim agenda also includes eliminating small businesses. This is one of the main reasons for mandatory lockdowns. The longer mom and pop stores stay closed, they won't ever reopen because the damage is too great. Large, multi-million-dollar corporations will pick up the extra market share and the Pilgrims' profits grow. Jeff Bezos' fortune grew $24 billion in the first 3 months of the coronavirus outbreak due to all of its smaller competitors being forced to close their doors. To rid the world of blacks, Hispanics, and poor people, Bill Gates talks openly about lowering the population by 10 to 15%. However, their plans are to get to the world population down to under 1 billion.
Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3. We could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Bill Gates and the Rockefellers plan to vaccinate the world. It will no longer be a choice. Vaccines mean control and money. Big Pharma is also now completely immune to legal action or action whatsoever if their vaccines cause injury or death. The total liability protection is called covered countermeasure. Big Pharma were eating into their profits with lawsuits due to vaccine injuries. So as always, money talks and the government listened. They now can inject people with anything without consequence. 5G is necessary for all the technology they require to fulfill their agenda. It is the most important thing the Pilgrims have introduced to the world since the central banking system. Without 5G, facial recognition, tracking, AI and gene editing would not be possible. Nanobots, facial recognition, security bots, bots in the workforce, internal tracking technology and transhumanism. Sterilizing blacks and poor people to rid the world of undesirable genetic traits. This used to involve encouraging undesirables to have abortions or sterilized via vaccines. However, with new 5G technology, this will be a much easier task for the Pilgrims. It is manipulating or augmenting human genetics using technologies such as artificial intelligence and gene editing. A white, rich super race is high on the agenda. Bill Gates' father was the head of Planned Parenthood. Many saw this as a covert means to justify abortion among minorities to reduce the population, which is why he has supported the climate change movement. Bill Gates in an interview said, "When I was growing up, my parents were always involved in various volunteer things. My dad was head of Planned Parenthood, and it was very controversial to be involved with that. And so, it's fascinating. At the dinner table, my parents were very good at sharing things that they were doing, and almost treating us like adults." Gates appears to be carrying out his father's objective. His wife, Melinda Gates, who had 3 kids, is alleged to have embraced abortion as a means for women to be liberated. Of course, abortion is a tool for eugenics. Many know of the racist legacy of Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, who once gave a talk to the KKK and helped to promote the, in quotes, Negro Project. In her own words, birth control means the release and cultivation of the better racial elements in our society and the gradual suppression, elimination and eventual extirpation of defective stocks, those human weeds which threaten the blooming of the finest flowers of American civilization. To this day, 79% of Planned Parenthood surgical abortion facilities are located within walking distance of African American or Hispanic neighborhoods. Few know that this project is continued on an international scale by the enormous wealth of Bill Gates. In 1965, the Rockefeller Foundation was a significant donor to the International Planned Parenthood Foundation. Today, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has spent billions on population control in Africa and throughout the Third World.
Great goodness. It is 8:42 New York time, and I got to my regular unit, and they took my patient away, my black guy. And now I'm getting switched units. This is exactly what happened before at the other hospital. As soon as I told somebody, or like management, and tried to advocate for my patient, they take the patient away from me and then they move me. So like, I legitimately don't even know what to do anymore. Like, even the advocacy groups don't give a shit about these people. Like, literally, like, Black lives don't matter here. And I mean, that's pretty sad that somebody who is white and lives hundreds of miles away from the city gives more of a shit about these people than the actual people in this city. Like, for real. Like,
Before their agenda is possible, they must first create a problem and make their agenda the solution. Let's face it, if out of nowhere governments around the world said we are going to inject you all with a tracking device, force vaccines, lock you down for 6 months, install deadly technology so we can track your every movement, crash the economy, depopulate the world, and eliminate people that don't fit in with our version of the perfect race, we would all freak out and there would be anarchy. We wouldn't expect the ridiculous changes and it just wouldn't happen. They are very smart people and they know this. In order to accept such drastic changes as a positive thing, they first need to create a problem big enough to warrant these changes.
Months, perhaps years ago, a new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died. Experts agree, unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere.
Be a surprise outbreak. Be a surprise outbreak. Be a surprise outbreak. Be a surprise outbreak.
Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this. If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Not missiles, but microbes.
COVID-19 is a man-made virus. HIV discoverer says, could only have been created in a lab. Dr. Luc Montagnier, the man who discovered the HIV virus back in 1983, is saying that the virus was man-made. Professor Luc Montagnier 2008 Nobel Prize winner for medicine claims that SARS-CoV-2 is a manipulated virus that was released from a laboratory in Wuhan, China.
Certaines conclusions.
Alors, nous sommes arrivés à la conclusion qu'effectivement, il y avait eu une manipulation au sujet de ce virus.
C'est-à-dire?
Eh bien, qu'une partie, je ne dis pas le total, n'est-ce pas, mais il y a un modèle qui est évidemment le virus classique, et là, c'était un modèle surtout venant de la chauve-souris, mais à ce modèle, on a par-dessus ajouté des séquences, notamment du VIH, le virus du sida.
Mais quand vous dites on a ajouté, qui a ajouté?
Ah, moi, je ne sais pas.
Mais c'est pas naturel, c'est ce que vous voulez dire?
Non, ce n'est pas naturel. C'était un travail de professionnel, un travail de biologiste moléculaire. C'est un travail très minutieux, on peut dire d'horloger, on peut dire au niveau des séquences.
Mais dans quel but?
Dans quel but, ça n'est pas clair. Moi, j'expose, si vous voulez, mon travail, c'est d'exposer.
The US funded a $3.7 million approved project by COVID-19 guru Dr. Anthony Fauci in 2015 after US ban was imposed on the monster germ research. Back in October 2014, the US government had placed a federal moratorium on gain-of-function research, altering natural pathogens to make them more deadly and infectious. As a result of rising fears about a possible pandemic caused by an accidental or deliberate release of these genetically engineered monster germs. As such, in October 2014, because of public health concerns, the US government banned all federal funding on efforts to weaponize 3 viruses: influenza, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, MERS, and severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS. In the face of a moratorium in the US, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and currently the leading doctor in the US Coronavirus Task Force, outsourced in 2015 the gain-of-function research to China's Wuhan lab and licensed the lab to continue receiving US government funding. The Wuhan lab is now at the center of scrutiny for possibly releasing the SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus and causing the global COVID-19 pandemic.
As I started looking at this information, and as I started seeing that this is actually a chimeric version, something that was developed here in the United States in 2015, was published in Nature magazine, that it was developed in the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where all the initial studies were done. The chimeric research, despite having a moratorium by the US government to prevent any chimeric research, by the way, just so your audience understands, chimeric research basically means that they're taking a naturally occurring substance or virus, in this case, and then mutating it, genetically modifying it, changing the configuration morphologically to gain function. It's called a gain of function study or gain of function research. And that basically means that they're making something that already may have some potential to cause harm, making it more harmful, making it more virulent, making it more resistant. And basically that's what I found, that they took the SHC014 strain of the coronavirus, the surface antigen component, and brought in the backbone from the SARS coronavirus, put them together, and then inserted HIV and MERS orthologs on top of it to make a more virulent, more detrimental virus. Now, the thing is that
if I could jump in for just a moment here, because what I think you're talking about is the moratorium that was placed, and then $3.7 million from the National Institute of Health was transferred to China so they could continue this research, even though the moratorium. So they basically outsourced this research to China. Is this the same topic we're talking about here? This news is just breaking?
Yes, this is exactly right. So it goes back to 2014. The U.S. government decided, based upon certain virologists at that time, saying that, look, there's no justification for this kind of research. There's a potential for it to cause harm, cause a pandemic, so there's no justification for us to do this type of research. So the government passed a moratorium in 2014. Fauci approved budget approved budgets to be monies to be section for this type of research. So basically, and I'm getting really, every time I think about this, it gets me really flustered because I'm so angry that he basically broke the law. He more than broke the law. He created this entire cascade that we're seeing with the world shutdown was created by this initial aspect back in 2015. He broke the law. He went against government moratoriums. He took taxpayer money and he funded research that has now led to the COVID-19.
As early as 2018, US State Department officials warned about safety risks at the Wuhan Institute of Virology lab on scientists conducting risky tests with the bat coronavirus. US officials made several trips to the Wuhan laboratory. According to a report, the US intelligence community has growing confidence that the current coronavirus strain may have accidentally escaped from the Wuhan Institute of Virology rather than from a wildlife market, as the Chinese Communist Party had first claimed. During a Sunday interview on the Cat Roundtable, Giuliani questioned why the US gave money to the lab. Kalispell, Montana doctor Annie Bukacek says COVID-19 death certificates are being manipulated and that the CDC is instructing physicians to exaggerate COVID-19 deaths on death certificates.
In this war against the coronavirus. In Elmhurst, Queens, that hospital there, lines of people lining up already this morning for about the last 45 minutes. Confirmed cases, people waiting to get tested. Supplies are in demand there.
Somebody said there would be hordes of people inside. That's why I didn't go in. Let's see. The doctor with his mask on and everything. Look at that. Nobody. Completely empty. There's just police, no EMS, nothing. Nothing, absolutely. Ghosts. That's all they got you afraid of, ghosts.
With a growing number of patients as supplies dwindle. You can see barricades behind us set up here outside of the hospital to keep order here because so many have been lining up every day to get tested.
Where's the long lines of the people trying to get tested?
We hear about how specially set up COVID hospitals are overflowing and they don't have enough staff or equipment to look after them all.
Overwhelmed by the demand for coronavirus testing, causing frustration.
We were overwhelmed yesterday with the response to people wanting testing.
Urgent Care Hawaii says its drive-up service was deluged by requests for coronavirus tests, some waiting as long as 4 hours.
Here's my question, guys. What's the game here? You're smart people. Why are they whipping us into a panic? Why are they lying about massive lines of people at testing centers? Night after night being told there are these long lines of people being managed at the urgent care, that they're being overwhelmed.
Some waiting as long as 4 hours.
Actually, the president or CEO of urgent care, while I was in front of the place, was telling me we're doing the best we can managing these massive lines. I'm like, I'm here, lady. And there's no line.
Minnesota Senator Dr. Scott Jensen revealed that hospitals are paid more if they list patients with a COVID-19 diagnosis. A pneumonia patient earns $5,000, but a COVID-19 patient untested and with the same symptoms would earn $13,000. Hospitals get paid 3 times as much if the patient then goes on a ventilator. These aren't all as a result of a positive test. These are suspected COVID-19 cases.
The entire purpose of this is to scare, the Jesus out of everyone. So then when next year comes, or even September, October of this year, when the flu season comes, people basically blindly say, yeah, chip me up. Yes, I'll accept a vaccine card. Yes, I'll have to get vaccinated before I get my driver's license. I'm willing to, show my little vaccine card before I go to the gym. Total control.
What's coming is a kill grid. Make no bones about it. These people, tell your kids we're overpopulated. These people that run things like Mr. Gates, Prince Philip, Mr. Rockefeller, the Rothschilds, all these people talk about how to reduce the population to 95% down from what it is right now. We are in the midst of a silent war. They're not going to fire a shot, folks. They're going to cook you. And they're going to do it with invisible radio frequency emissions you're addicted to and in love with, because your junk works no matter where you go. You got to have your texts, you got to have your emails, you got to check your Facebook.
FiveG system is a WiGig wireless network that operates in the 60 GHz spectrum with a download speed of up to 10 gigabytes per second compared to the 4G's download speed of 10 megabytes per second. However, the frequency of 60 GHz is the frequency at which oxygen molecules oscillate. At 60 GHz, 98% of the transmitted 5G energy will be absorbed by atmospheric oxygen, which then alters the orbital properties of the electrons of the oxygen molecules. 60 GHz is the frequency of oxygen molecule absorption. Oxygen molecules have electrons that they share with each other. Oxygen is a diatomic molecule. What we breathe are 2 oxygen molecules bonded together with the electrons that they share. When the oxygen molecule is hit with 60 GHz 5G waves, these waves affect the orbital resonance properties of those shared electrons. It is those shared electrons that bind to the hemoglobin in our blood. When the oxygen is disrupted, it will no longer bind to the hemoglobin and myoglobin, oxygen carrying molecules, and therefore will not be able to carry oxygen to the cell's powerhouse, mitochondria. Without oxygen, the liver becomes congested and the body and brain begins to break down due to slow suffocation. Because the brain is the body's organ most sensitive to the lack of oxygen, not getting enough oxygen to the brain will result in brain hypoxia. Brain hypoxia symptoms range from mild to severe. The main symptoms of coronavirus, i.e. shortness of breath, coughing and fever, are shared with common 5G side effects. In Wuhan, we see footage of people collapsing in the street and dying that were otherwise young and healthy, which are the same symptoms caused by severe brain hypoxia or shortness of breath.
I guarantee you folks, when they roll this stuff out, they're going to turn it on in such a way that it's going to seem like polio came back. And you know what they got ready for you? A vaccine. What do we hear about all the time on the news now? Vaccines, vaccines, vaccines. I'm in California, and guess what? You can't put your kids in one of these government mind control facilities unless you inject them with like 60 shots. Now, if you have any brains, you won't go for that. You'll find a way out of it. And you know how to do that. You can homeschool your kids, or you can get a medical exemption. You gotta do what you gotta do to protect your children. Now, they are gonna roll out a microwave weaponry system that is gonna induce symptoms that people are gonna think are a new type of virulent strain of polio or some sort of neuroinvasive encephalitis or some sort of paralytic disease that they're going to blame on some newly discovered strain of something, and they're going to have a shot ready for you, and they're going to make it mandatory. Mark my words, that's the plan here. Aside from the fact that this stuff's going to make you sick and it's going to screw everybody up, it's going to make a lot of people very wealthy, and it's going to concentrate power because a sick, weak-minded populace becomes servile and slaves really quick.
People are dying all around the world within close proximity of 5G towers. It was documented in the 5G appeal in 2017, which is now signed by 372 of the world's leading scientists, that 5G will cause flu-like symptoms, respiratory issues, and deaths. It is no coincidence that COVID-19 was released in Wuhan, which happened to be an official 5G test city, with 5G turned on a month before COVID was released in the very same city. These people have unexplained deaths with COVID symptoms and therefore labelled COVID-19 cases, and the number goes up. New March House Aged Care Facility in Western Sydney currently has 17 deaths within a few days. The New March facility is in the middle of a square with 4 5G towers on each corner, less than 1 kilometre away. Cedar Meatworks in Victoria, Australia, has at least 75 confirmed cases among its employees. Cedar Meats is within a stone's throw of a 5G tower. The same patterns appear all over the world. Is this because 5G causes coronavirus? No. 5G causes COVID-like symptoms with worse cases ending in death, just like COVID. There are many reasons why 5G deaths are classified as COVID deaths. They don't want to admit that 5G kills people, or even makes them sick because they need it so desperately. So they created COVID-19 as a distraction and something to blame the deaths on. Wuhan 5G went live in November 2019, and people started dropping dead in the streets unexplainedly shortly after.
House Rule 66 or House Resolution 6666 is for COVID-19 Testing, Reaching, and Contacting Everyone Act. The acronym is TRACE Act. Again, TRACE Act stands for Testing, Reaching, and Contacting Everyone. It was introduced by Bobby Rush, who is a Democrat from the state of Illinois. And they have introduced this bill into the House, and they are going to roll this out from a testing standpoint in Ventura County, California, which happens to be where I'm at right now. And I couldn't believe that I heard this, but basically this act is to allow individuals to come into your house, and if you've got a cough or somebody in your family has a cough, or you have a fever or anything that they determine that shows that you have COVID-19, regardless of if you've been tested or not. They will also test people, but remember that testing already has been shown to be there to be a high rate of false positives. False positives meaning you don't have COVID-19, but the test shows it's false positive. It's showing up as positive, so they call it a false positive. We already know from the studies previously done as far back as 1984, but as recently as 2018, that individuals that did not have COVID-19 or coronavirus, even in the cat model, cats that had never been exposed to coronavirus tested positive if they had had a flu shot. And we don't know about the H1N1 shot. We don't know about the herpes zoster shot, the shingles shot. There's many other vaccines that people have gotten. We have no idea if people are going to be testing positive, have false positives based upon those tests. So the point is that the chance of them testing someone and them being positive is pretty doggone high, even if the person doesn't have COVID-19. But they're going to use that to pull you or your loved ones away under pretense of public safety and put you into quarantine. This is a load of rubbish, because if you're in your home isolated, who are you going to expose? All right? And if they're going to try to take you away from your family, the chances of you having infected your family, even if you did really have COVID-19, is about 99.9%. They're using this as an attempt to further divide us as individuals. They divided us from our friends, from our social circles. Now they're dividing us from our own family units. This is the most ominous sign so far that we've seen.
When the economy crashes, there is only one winner: the pilgrims. When a government goes into debt, they get bailed out by the central bank, which can create money out of thin air and then lend it to the government at interest. The Rockefellers and the Rothschilds already own every nation's central bank, besides, of course, Iran, North Korea, and Cuba. If COVID-19 doesn't get the pilgrims the central banks of those three countries, another war will follow, if history is of any indication. They already own the coronavirus patent. Gates has funded everyone who is working on the vaccine. He owns shares in most companies he donates to, so his wealth is set to skyrocket. Bill Gates has invested hundreds of millions of dollars into Gilead Sciences. Gilead Sciences is an American biotechnology company holding the patent for drug remdesivir for treating various coronaviruses in over 70 countries. The company has secured orphan drug status for remdesivir, allowing it to exclusively obtain marketing revenues for up to 7 years. Remdesivir has been granted FDA approval and now is the drug of choice for treating COVID-19 until the vaccine is ready. Pharmaceutical company Moderna began working on a vaccine in February 2020. Moderna is collaborating with 5 pharmaceutical companies to produce the COVID-19 vaccine. Bill Gates has invested in all 5 of these companies. The internet hails Bill Gates as a philanthropist, but he is at best a venture capitalist investing money in companies where he knows he's going to profit. 5G is being sold as necessary technology in wake of the coronavirus outbreak. While we have been locked down, they have put up a 5G tower in almost every neighbourhood. AI and tracking technology have also been sold as necessary due to COVID-19. In creating COVID-19, the Pilgrims created a big problem enough to make significant changes to our everyday lives. Nothing will ever be the same. With every event like this, they reel in the freedoms and say it is for our own good. After a while, they release the tension to make it appear as though things are going back to normal. This, of course, doesn't happen. They never wind the reel back to where it was. It will always be a bit tighter. The bigger the problem, the more they wind the reel. Our only hope is that enough people open their eyes and their minds and accept nothing more than the freedom and independence that each of us deserve.